Hi, I'm going to show you a wet on wet painting technique using oil-based enamel one shot. This is a lettering and sign artist paint. It's been around for a long time. It's slow drying. It can be reduced with the reducer that they make. They have a low temp reducer and a high temp reducer according to the climate that you live in. Or you can use a cheaper alternative, which is mineral spirits, to thin the one shot. And I start by first doing a simple outline with a China marker, and the first thing I do after I have my sketch is I paint the leaves in using the reduced one shot. It's a little bit tricky because you got to know how to use a paintbrush fairly well. Sometimes you have to manipulate the brush, turn it so you can get that nice pointed edge on your leaf. And then once you get your outline, fill in the inner portion. Now I'm painting on a plastic Adirondack chair, and it has a simulated wood grain. Not the most ideal surface. It usually works better on a smooth surface, but sometimes you got to make do. Now the trick with the one shot is when you get to this point, you have to wait and let this paint start to tack up or dry, but not completely dry. Because then I come back once the paint has started to tack up, and I use an acrylic, a water-based acrylic, in my airbrush to airbrush white highlights and shading before it dries. And the reason I do that is because when you paint a water-based paint on top of an oil-based paint and you let it all dry together, that eliminates the need to apply a clear coat or a top coat on top of it, which normally, if you've ever used acrylics, you know they have to have some type of protection. Otherwise you could just scrape it right off with your fingernail. So that eliminates that process of having to apply a top coat once you're finished. These one-shot enamels dry, extremely durable. They're excellent for exterior objects, things that are going to be outside in the elements. I've done a picnic table, and like I said, this is an Adirondack chair. Things that are going to be exposed to the elements do very well with these very durable oil-based enamels. Now, you don't have to use one shot. This stuff, it can be kind of difficult to find depending on where you live. If you can't find one shot, I would recommend Rust-Oleum, because it's basically the same thing. It's an oil-based enamel, and that's really all you need. So I'm just letting this dry for a little bit, and I'll show you. Here is one that was done earlier, and here you can see the white highlights, and I use a little bit of black just on the tips, and the flower is sketched on here. And the reason I do the leaves first is because when I come back and paint the actual flower petals, that eliminates getting all that overspray that you can see. If I had done the flower first and then came back and did the leaves, it's hard to avoid the overspray. And this just leaves a much cleaner look in the end. So now I'm going to paint one of the flowers here, show you how that's done. I'm just cleaning my brush out. You always want to start with a clean brush. And I'm using a dark magenta, which is always a good color to use for flowers. Now, the light's a little bit tricky right now, so I'm going to try and do my best. I have this chair laying on its back just for videotaping purposes. Normally I would not paint in this position. Try to find the position that works best for you so you're comfortable. This is not ideal for me. Okay, now that you get to this point, you're going to want to stop and let this dry for a while. I usually wait 15 to 20 minutes because otherwise, if you come back too soon and you take your airbrush and you've got too much air pressure, I usually work between 15 to 20 psi, it's pounds per square inch. Any more than that, before this paint is allowed to tack up enough, when you press down and that air comes out, it's going to push and move the paint, and that's going to be a problem. Because right now it's nice and smooth, no flaws in it, and that's the look that you want. So I've given my leaf a little time to tack up, hopefully. If it doesn't work, oh well. Where is it? There we go. Try to get in a little bit closer so you can see. Now I'm going to do a little highlighting. And I just got my white acrylics in my airbrush, thinned with water. You don't want them too thick and you don't want them too wet. Kind of a milky consistency is best. Lower my pressure a little bit. Then I come back with a smaller brush than the one that I used to originally paint the leaf. And I put the little vein Then I'll come back with a little black and just touch the very tip here to give it that illusion of depth, that it's behind the actual flower petals, like I did on the other one over here. And basically it's the same thing when you're doing the flowers. You brush on the enamel, give it a while to tack up, come back and do your little white highlights, some shading in the center, and I'll show you the end results when I'm finished. It may be too soon to tackle this flower with my highlights, but I'm going to give it a shot. Like I said, normally I would not suggest you work at the speed that I'm working, because it'll just be problem after problem. Take your time, slow down, give that first coat time to dry, but not completely dry. That's the important thing. You have a pretty good window of time. I'd say at least a half an hour, but I wouldn't wait too much longer than that, because if it dries, then that acrylic's not going to bind as well as it would if it was not as dry. So let's see if we can put some highlights on here. It's not too soon. Now I have to change colors on my airbrush, so bear with me, that takes a minute or two. Okay, got my black in. Now I'm just going to create the shading in the center of the flower using my airbrush. You don't want to go too dark. And the last thing I do is I'll hand brush in a few little stems popping out from the center. Then to top it all off, just throw in a few little doodads right at the end. There you have it. I'm going to turn it around, right side up. Well, I can show you one here that I did previously. And here's what it looks like when you take your time, go slow. You can see you can get a lot of really nice detail between the white highlights and shading. And it also works well on glass. Here's a small mirror I did. Same principle. Try to get it right side up. There we go. You can see as big or as small as you want to do it. So you can see how small this is. It's a small little mirror. And here's a larger one that's a little bit bigger than that one. And I added a little hummingbird feeding off of the hibiscus. There's a lot of little things you can do. You can add butterflies, bees, whatever your imagination feels like coming up with. And the nice thing about working on glass is that if you let it dry overnight, you can come back the next day and just take a razor blade and it'll just scrape right off with a razor blade. Or if you're impatient, just take a rag with some mineral spirits and just wipe it clean. As far as if you do try doing a mirror, I found out that Windex does not do a good job, because the one-shot enamels that I used, it used to be the only paint, as far as I'm aware of, that still contained lead. But they've since changed the formula. It has no lead in it, and it doesn't perform as well as it used to. But I tried cleaning this mirror right here with Windex, and it actually took off some of the white highlights I had on here. So I had to figure out another plan. And I discovered that distilled white vinegar works fantastic. I take an old spray bottle, do a 50% mixture of distilled white vinegar and 50% water, shake it up really good, then I spray that onto a paper towel or cleaning cloth and wipe the whole surface clean while it's wet, then come back with a dry cloth and dry it off. And that did not take off any of the acrylic highlights and shading that mineral spirits did. In the old days, I could do this and wipe it all down with mineral spirits, and it would clean it beautifully and wouldn't harm any of the artwork. But like I said, now that they've taken the lead out, it's changed it drastically. But here's the other one that I was just painting on. This one has more flowers. I'm actually planning on going all the way down to the bottom. I'm not going to do the seat or down in here, anywhere where there's going to be a lot of friction. I'm still wondering if it's going to rub off with the friction of people's backs rubbing on it, but I've done 2 of these and sold them, and I haven't had any problems yet, so we'll see. But give it a shot if you're so inclined. It's a fun technique. It takes patience, but I think you'll like the results. And thanks for watching.